Hello, my name is Czaczkes, and in this presentation I'll be speaking about the extent of ant learning flexibility. So, pheromone trail following is an instinctive behavior in ants, and it can be performed very accurately, as you can see in this picture here, and does not require learning. However, this instinctive behavior is flexible and is modifiable by the ants. We can demonstrate this flexibility by teaching ants to ignore pheromone trails. So, for example, in this experiment, we trained ants on a Y maze like this, where one arm leads to a reward, so here, and another leads to a punishment, so here. The arm leading to a reward is always scented with lemon, so this is maximally informative. It always leads to the food. The other arm is scented with a pheromone trail, but this is uninformative. Half the time it leads to punishment, like in this case. This means, in this case, that there is incongruent or conflicting information. On another visit, however, there might be congruent information. So half the time the pheromone trail also leads to the food. That's congruent. So the ants do 24 of these visits with a pseudo-random order of rewarded side and whether or not the information is congruent. And we see that when information conflicts, ants initially make a lot of errors. However, they quickly begin to ignore the pheromone trail and begin to make mostly correct decisions. This shows that there is quite some flexibility in how these insects respond to pheromones. But how far does this flexibility go? We decided to test this by asking whether the ants can learn to do exactly the opposite of the innate response to pheromone trails, so that is, to avoid them. So we let the ants make 25 visits to a food source where the pheromone always led towards a punishment and away from the reward. Now, the rewarded side changes pseudo-randomly, and the only clue to where the reward is where the pheromone is not. So we made 25 visits, and the question is, do the ants improve over time? So here are the results, and you can see the proportion of ants making correct decisions. Ants initially make a lot of mistakes. They follow the pheromone trail at the start, but they quickly begin to improve and learn to ignore the pheromone trails. But the improvement stops at chance level. The ants never learn to avoid the pheromone trails. We can see what's going on if we look more closely at the decision side of the ants. So specifically, whether the ants choose the same side as in their previous choice. So for example, go left, then left again, or whether they try a new side. Initially, ants often switch side. However, very quickly, each ant chooses a side which is its favorite side, and it sticks to it. Now, by the end of the experiment, they all go in this one direction. And it seems that the ants have developed a heuristic. Choose a side, always try that side first, but quickly correct yourself if you're wrong. We can see the development of this heuristic by looking at the time the ants take to solve the maze. So ants solve the task faster over time. But I think it's interesting to overlay the correct decisions over this. To me, it looks like there are 3 stages. So initially, the ants are learning to ignore the pheromone trail. They're saving time by making fewer errors. In the second stage, ants have developed their side choice heuristic. They're not improving the proportion of correct decisions anymore, and they still need quite a bit of time sometimes to solve the maze. Finally, in the third stage, the ants have a fully formed heuristic and they're exploiting it. So they're solving the maze in a very, very short time, even though they're not improving the proportion of correct decisions at all. So, in conclusion, ants do not slavishly follow pheromone trails. They can learn to ignore them, but there are hard limits to this flexibility. They cannot learn to avoid pheromone trails. An important control I skipped is that ants can learn to avoid neutral scents. So, we see that there is rapid flexibility in learning about these innate signals, but with hard limits to this flexibility. Thank you very much for watching my talk.